Alrighty, good morning everybody. Happy Monday. It is November 13th, 2023. We're going to go ahead and get started here. I was on a bit of a road trip last week there, heading back to Vegas, so I'm finally back home in Las Vegas. It feels nice. Back to my main setup and everything. It's a breath of fresh air after being in a small little workspace for a couple months, so anyway, I don't want to spend too much time talking about, garbage. So let's go ahead and go into this morning's pre-market and review. So last week, and I'm going to go ahead and pull up our 60-minute chart here and look at what we were dealing with when we were here last, I believe it was on the 7th, right? So on the 7th, this is kind of what had on our charts here. I did our pre-market on the 7th. We talked about wanting to see the bulls get through 4,400 to 4,403. So this box here was the exact area we expected to see the bulls have trouble on the way up. And I think we called it the bulls' first task back on the 7th. So on the 7th, this is what we basically saw. We saw this was our area we wanted to get through to have any faith in the bulls. And if we could get through that area on the 7th, we were expecting a push up to find trouble around our scaffolding, but then target into our next pocket, which was right here, 44.31 to 34. Now these red lines here have been expanded for today's pre-market, but I believe on Tuesday of last week, this was that very discrete area, 44.31 to 34, that we expected as a great area for a target to take profit if we were going to be bulls once we could break out through 4,400 to 4,403. And so what happened on the 7th is we came right to 4,403, nearly to the tick. Our first expected resistance zone, the top end of it, and the bulls could not get through. So we tested it 2-3 times there on Tuesday, pulled back in the overnight session. And then what happened going into Wednesday? So on Wednesday, I wasn't here to give you guys a pre-market, but you had the bullish first task on your chart. You had your target to the upside, 44.31 to 34. And then we had some obvious resistances above, and then our next task for the bulls a little bit further up. So on Wednesday, what happened? They peaked into the top end, 44.03, of our expected bullish first task zone area, and then failed. Right? So that is what happened there on Wednesday. Nothing super notable in terms of where we bounced on the pullback. It did pull back right to that previous major resistance. And if I was here on Wednesday, I would have given you this level right here, the major swing, and the top of that chop zone there, right, that little pocket, and our scaffolding right here. And would have told you that would have been a great area if the market pulled back to find some support. And what do you know? About 2-3 points into that level is where we found the low of the day on Wednesday. And then there's our support, right? We get a pullback from our first expected resistance area that I gave you on Tuesday of last week. We come down, we hold basically off the scaffolding and that major resistance, which again was also right off our scaffolding, interestingly enough. And where do we go? We pop right into our we pop up, we try to get up into our first expected resistance. It fails. So this is what happened on Wednesday. And on Wednesday, in our pre-market, I would have told you we have some potential bearishness starting to form up off the highs on our 60-minute, and I believe also on the 4-hour. And what happened? We got our pullback. So we had trouble in our first bullish task zone for 2 days, testing it once, twice, 3, 4, 5 times. Pulls back in the overnight session. They pop through on Wednesday or on Thursday of that week, and it sells off really heavy. Right, and then comes up, and where was the high of last week? So on Friday, we get this huge rally out. Now, the support down here was nothing notable, right? We didn't have a nice scaffolding there. There wasn't a major swing. So in my opinion, kind of bounced right, or the scene of the crime for this major rotation wasn't necessarily off of a level that we watch or anything, so nothing notable about that. But we get this pop, and where do the bulls bring the market? Right to our next pocket of expected resistance, 44.31 to 34. In fact, the high of last week was 35.5, just 6 ticks ahead above our next target for the bulls. if you were here on Tuesday of last week, our first target for the bulls was right there. So last week when I wasn't here, you guys should have understood that this was not a good sign for the bulls. We pulled back, we held a good level, okay? They peaked above and failed. Again, not super great for the bulls there. But then once we failed from this first area of resistance, the bulls recovered, and as they broke out, you should have been able to be a bull up to our first expected resistance. So the high of last week was our first target for the bulls last week. And now we're pulling back, coming into this week now, and here I am to help you guys out with levels and some ideas for what we want to do here this morning. But again, I mean, in terms of, I didn't go into the 512 and look at all the beautiful holds off VWAP and off the other things that happened all throughout last week. But the general idea here is we had a task zone we wanted to see the bulls get through, and we had our first target, 31 to 34. And that's exactly where the market went to, okay? So even without me here, you guys should have been all set up. So here we are coming into the pre-market here this morning in the overnight session, the Globex session. I guess we can go down to the 512 here and just see if anything super notable has happened here in the overnight session. I guess the most notable thing to notice is that, first of all, we held the back end of VWAP. I've been talking about this setup in the overnight session for months, if not, months now. Holds the back end of VWAP, and you would have captured the whole sell-off last night into the overnight, into the midnight basically, and then we held the VWAP multiple times here in, again, this was right in the middle of the night there, probably while you were asleep. But then comes back and holds the VWAP to the upside, and then where is our major resistance in the overnight session? Ooh. Oh, that's pretty. I didn't mean to draw that. What is the overnight resistance here? Lord. A double top off the close of the day before. Close of Friday. Extended hours, right? So, still some really nice, beautiful price action in our overnight session leading to the Monday pre-market. And that leads us to our pre-market for this morning. So, let's go ahead and actually, what I'm going to do here, I know I'm limited on time and stuff, but I do want to go back and just point out some of the little details here. So like this was Friday of last week. The high of the morning here, right, was 50% of the previous day. I told you guys, this line I added, I believe, this morning. So I told you guys, these daily power levels, if all you traded was the VWAP, the daily power levels, and our scaffolding, the high of the day, or the high of the morning there, was 50% of the previous day. Pulls back, holds the VWAP nearly to the tick here for multiple bounces. Okay, comes down, and then once we bounce, pulls back to VWAP to nearly the tick, and then we get this beautiful push right to one of our support and resistance levels we add to the chart. Pulls back and then holds 50% of the previous day and the 200 here to the tick to come up, find resistance off our scaffolding, pull back, and then continue to push towards the end of the day there. So, I mean, if you look into the details of what's happened here all last week, I mean, these levels are still holding unbelievably well. I mean, here is a bounce, and this is going back to Thursday of last week. We have this major sell-off, bounces right off our scaffolding, comes up and fails right off the previous daily low to come down and then try to get through to that scaffolding and hold it to the downside, which it does, right? So if you just go back and look at the details of what happened last week, because I can't go through here, I don't have enough time to go through every single day. I mean, there's still just unbelievable holds. There was a beautiful head and shoulders pattern here. There's your shoulder, there's your head, there's your shoulder right off of the hopeful, and then the major breakdown right to our next support, the scaffolding, right? So if we were to go back and really scrutinize all the price action from last week, I mean, it's just unbelievable holds off these areas. So you have opportunities here, guys, and that basically wraps it up. So let's go ahead and jump into the pre-market for this morning. What I want to do is go ahead, we're in a